Hi students, Dr. Newmark here. This is the video that I promised to you all that will show you some of the drafts that were submitted to the discussion board and talk you through my insights about how they could be improved before the deadline for this assignment on Wednesday. Okay, so I have made the drafts of the students in our class anonymous by just including a little white box over the name. And I have an example from a student from a previous class, and she gave me her permission to use it. So that one has her name on it. So we're going to start out with this one here. And let me click to the first page. So as I told you in the assignment, you need to include a job advertisement that you found, and you need to annotate it. This student used these little comment bubbles and annotated her PDF this way. And she provided several questions here. So there are 5 questions on this page, and there are 2 questions on this page. So that's pretty sufficient, asking some questions of me or of the advertisement itself about what certain parts of it mean. Since you all are not yet launched into a career as professional or technical communicators, you might not know everything that the job ad is asking about. So here they are. Why is it appealing to you? What do they expect this employee to do? And how does this represent the present state of the field? And does this surprise you at all? This student wrote 3 paragraphs, and that is absolutely sufficient. That looks great. Here's the job letter. This student should probably go in and adjust the template a little bit so that this information from the template has been removed. This student also needs to include a signature, but I like how this is blocked up. This is called chunked text, and so the student does a pretty good job with this. You don't really need to start off by saying hello. You've already introduced yourself with a greeting at the top. The student includes some information about herself and then why the student is an appropriate candidate for this job. Now, I know a lot of you struggled with the fact that you are not yet fully trained for these jobs that you see advertisements for, but some students wrote to me and asked me about that. I asked you guys to think sort of complexly about the skills that you do have from your previous jobs. Unrelated to technical communication, but whatever jobs that you do have, and how those skills might be applicable. Have you been a manager? Have you had to learn software quickly? Have you had to manage group projects? Whatever that is from your school or work experience, you could sort of attach that to or apply it to the skills that the ad is looking for. Okay, so here's the student's resume. This looks really nice. I like how these headings are in the left-hand column. I love how the text is chunked. This leads with the most recent item, University of New Mexico Education, 2008 to present. That's perfect. C&M comes next because that's farther in the past. Everything needs to go present backwards to the thing that is most historical, thing that's farthest in the past. This looks like a really nice and tidy resume that uses white space and text space in a really effective way. Okay, so next up we have this one. And we see the job ad. This one I struggled with a little bit because I didn't see the annotation. It wasn't as clearly visible as in the previous one that I showed you. This student does answer the 3 questions. Why is this appealing to you? What do they expect? And does it surprise you? This is very, very sufficient, but I didn't see flagged the annotation. I'll show you another one in which it is flagged in the Word document as opposed to using annotation in the PDF, which the previous student did. Okay, so now we have the application letter. This looks pretty good. Having this up here at the right margin and this over here at the left margin is a little bit visually confusing. All of that could be at the left-hand margin and should be single-spaced. All of this content, the block paragraphs, those are all single-spaced, so this should be as well. This is nicely chunked and we have multiple paragraphs, so that's very good, but we do have an extra space right here. Thank you for your time. This student also really tries to attach the previous work experience to what this job is asking for, and that's appropriate. Okay, here we have the resume, the summary, and the student has education listed. It should lead with University of New Mexico. The student has a GPA, the courses, and the employment. These dates aren't quite right because these dates are in the future, 2026, 2022 to 2025. I think this student might be hypothesizing that these are future jobs. If you can, write the resume in a realistic way that speaks to the skills that you do have. I don't mind that this content is in paragraph style, but if you think back to the previous student's example, some of the major skills were in bullet pointed style, and all of the bullet points were in the same style called parallel style. So they all started with a strong verb, and then they described what the skill was. Okay, so that is the second one. Now this is a previous student, so I'm gonna get to that, let's see, in just a second. So here's another one from your class. Okay, so this student used inline annotation and highlighted it in red. Red is a little bit difficult to read through, so I would suggest using a lighter color. But this is what the student did in terms of annotation. I'm not exactly sure what this means. I'm not adept in Adobe, so I would need to practice. I would like to see a little bit more annotation than this. But again, the student answered the 3 questions. That's just fine. I changed the name to John Smith here. That's not the student's name. So this is a little bit too boilerplate or too impersonal. Dear UCLA employer. Again, we have a hello. We don't really need that greeting. We also have a margin discrepancy where this is not in line with this. In technical communication, everything, and in professional communication, everything has to be absolutely precise to the eye's view. I also see some extra spacing here that doesn't make a lot of sense in regard to how everything else is spaced out. It needs to be consistent. This student does say, I made some things up because I'm not out of high school yet. Totally makes sense. I understand that because these are jobs that you are working towards in the future and you might not have all the skills yet. I would prefer, as I mentioned in the previous case, that you should try to attach the skills that you do have to the job that you are writing towards. But in this case, the student is still in high school, so that might be a little bit harder to do. The student needs to look more carefully at appropriate capitalization of titles of things and needs to do a better job of fleshing out in the body of the letter the skills that the student has and how they apply to the job. The best way to do that is by using anchor terms from the ad itself. Just pick out some really salient terms from the ad and be sure that you mention them in your letter and that you're providing examples of your knowledge of or work in those areas. Here's the student's resume. Again, we have some marginal discrepancy where there is an inconsistent to the eye alignment on the left. You see that it's very slightly different. Either it has to be different enough that your eye understands that you're using spacing to signal a subcategory, or it has to align perfectly. And as you see in this case, it doesn't. In this case also, though the student is still in high school, you probably want the C&M UNM item first because it's going to continue after the high school diploma is completed. Similarly here too, you have high school diploma. You don't want high school diploma signaled in a different font color as if it's the section heading. You want the name of the school, its location, and the date to be the most significant. And your textbook shows some great examples of this, so I hope you will look back at that. Similarly, you need a little block explaining the name of the institution, where it is in the years that you're going, and then the major that you're studying in. So skills, these should also be teased out a little bit more. I would implore you to look at the book's examples. That would really help here. So let's go back to some previous students. This is my previous student, Katrina Gallegos. She's got a link up here to her multimodal component. She actually was in the military before she came back to college, so she has a lot of experience to report. Not all of you will have that. But if you look through this video again and you pause it and you look at how her resume is fleshed out and the details there, I hope you will be inspired to provide some more detail in yours. This student, because she had a previous job, and this really applies to those of you who have returned to college, her work experience comes first. Her education comes later. Those of you who, like the student who's still in high school, or those of you who are sort of in your first experience in college, your education comes first before work, as was shown in the previous examples. Okay, here is the annotation the student provided for the job ad. Lots of annotation. And this student chose to answer the questions in a little comment bubble. That's not as fleshed out as some of the examples I've already shown from your class, so that's not quite as sufficient. Here's the job letter. And this student actually applied for this internship, so she used the materials from this class to then put them into play in a real world situation. So you can pause this video and actually read through this letter. That might be useful to you. Okay, so we're going to look at one more from a previous student. This is from my student Ellery, who just graduated. Here's her link to her Wix site, her multimodal component. She also did her annotation in line. You can see that here in orange. And here are her answers to the questions. Those are very fleshed out. Here's her letter, really nicely chunked text. She does have the address and date and the human resources address that she's applying to up here on the left. And then here's her resume. I encourage you to pause this video as you look through it again and pay close attention to what I said here in terms of what was done well and what could still be improved before the final draft. And I'm going to sign off, and I hope you have a great day.